blast on the tube during rush hour led to panic and mayhem. Emergency services kicked in, high-level meetings were called. The investigation is still on. Here's what we have so far.
Terror has struck London again. This time an explosion occurred on the last carriage of a tube train travelling at the Parsons Green Station. The Metropolitan Police is treating the explosion as a terror incident, as officials from the Counter-Terrorism Command and forensic teams look for clues.
As you've reported, at 8:20 this morning at Parsons Green Tube Station, there was an explosion on a tube train. Police have attended. We now assess that this was a detonation of an improvised explosive device. As you'll have seen, the reports of 18 injuries, and I understand most of those to be flash burns.
The blast happened during morning rush hour, when many office goers and students use public transport to commute. They were visibly shaken. As passengers fled the tube, they captured a white bucket in flames on the floor of the train carriage.
It's early in the morning, I think about 8:30. Kids are trying to get into school. Obviously, being a fitness instructor, I'm quite fit, so I can get myself out there faster. But I'm looking around me, I'm seeing little kids, dropping on the floor. Elder people can't get out fast enough. Like literally at one point, walking down the stairs at Parsons Green, I see someone jumping over. Not caring if they break their bones or whatever.
I got to the train station about 5 minutes after everything had initially happened. It was still quiet. There was police presence there, and I did notice a few police cars there, them dressed in the gear with their guns and things like that, and that's when I noticed and realised something had actually happened.
British Prime Minister Theresa May chaired the meeting of the Cobra Emergency Committee. US President Donald Trump condemned the attack in the strongest of terms, using it as another excuse to push for tougher immigration norms in his country. Britain has suffered 4 terrorist attacks this year, leaving 36 people dead. Police presence has been stepped up across the country.
The public should go about their daily lives, but remain vigilant, and people who are travelling in London will see an increased armed police presence on the transport network, and they will see security will be increased, and the police will, of course, do what is necessary to protect the public. The threat of terrorism that we face is severe, but together, by working together, we will defeat them.
This attack comes right after the British Home Office said that the number of arrests in terror-linked offences has spiked by 68%. Almost 400 people have been arrested. But UK's intelligence community has only managed to foil 19 terrorist plots since June 2013. Bureau Report, WION.
As we've been saying, investigation hasn't yet established that it is a terror attack. There are more questions than answers at this point. Yet this incident is significant and worrying. It reflects the larger trend. And this is, as we said, the 5th such attack in the UK in 6 months. The modus operandi points to the rise of a dangerous new norm for Europe. The threat has always been there. According to a Europol report in 2016, the biggest threat the continent faces is in the form of attacks by foreign fighters of terrorist organizations and lone wolves. In the last 6 months alone, there have been 4 major terrorist attacks in Europe. This is the 5th one in London itself. And on the 22nd of March, as I'm sure you remember, a lone wolf attacker drove a car into pedestrians on the Westminster Bridge in London. 4 people died in that incident. 49 others were injured. In less than 2 months, another terrorist attack, and this was much bigger. This was in Manchester, the Manchester Arena. 22 people died, 250 others were grievously hurt, and we will bring up pictures of that. This is the Westminster attack, of course. The Manchester attack, 250 people left injured. In the very next month, 2 attackers killed 8 locals at the London Bridge. 48 others were hurt in that attack. So you see, the casualty figures are small, but the idea is to spread terror, and to that extent, they end up being successful. On the 17th of August, 16 people died. 24 others were hurt in a series of attacks in the Spanish city of Catalonia. We could go on in this vein. The city has changed, the weapons changed, but the style remains the same. The reason for this approach is very clear. The cost is less, the yield is more in terms of damage. Plus, such attacks make global headlines, keeping the element of fear alive. Britain alone has seen a record number of arrests for terrorism-linked offences this year. The number has shot up by as much as 68%. A total of 105 people have been charged with terrorist offences. 32 out of them have been found guilty. Police and intelligence community in the UK have been able to foil only 19 terror plots since June 2013, and many blame the government's policies for the spike in attacks. Going soft on certain sections of society to harness their votes, and the fear of being branded racist for targeting some communities are cited among reasons why terror modules have sprouted across the UK. Let's take this discussion forward. Mandy Clark, our London bureau chief, who's been reporting on this since the morning, joins us live from London. Also with us from London, Professor Tahir Abbas, senior research fellow at the Royal United Services Institute and visiting senior fellow at the London School of Economics. Good evening to both of you. Mandy, to you first. What's the latest in the investigation?
The latest that we're hearing, and this is just from one media outlet, that police have now identified the suspect using this CCTV footage, that the footage, and they haven't named the suspect, but they believe they have identified the suspect who was responsible for the bombing. Not more information coming out there, but we do know 22 people are still who were injured in the blast. They are still receiving treatment at local hospitals. They were sent to numerous hospitals right after the attack happened to ensure that not one hospital was overwhelmed. They continue to be in hospital. We're told the district line will remain closed throughout the day as police continue their forensic investigation. What they're doing now is looking at that IED, that improvised explosive device, to understand who might be behind this attack and whether it is linked to any terror networks.
I want to ask you how serious are the injuries sustained by the victims, and also by when do we expect normal services, tube services, to resume, if they haven't already?
They haven't already. We haven't been told the seriousness, but we do know none of these injuries are life-threatening. And it is the first terror attack in the UK this year that has not resulted in a single death. So that is a reason to celebrate, even if it's a small reason when it comes to a terror attack. So not life-threatening injuries to any of the victims. We don't know if they'll be life-changing, because a lot of the injuries, we are told, were burns that happened on the face. So facial burns could lead to severe scarring. We simply don't know the state of those facial burns. There was quite a few also injured in the chaos afterwards, people panicking, trying to get out of the tube station. But as I said, none of them are life-threatening.
That's good news, certainly. Tahir Abbas, reports also saying at this point that the damage is limited because the IED device did not detonate properly. What does this trend indicate, and how serious is what happened today in the series of events that we've seen unfold in the UK in particular and Europe in general?
Well, as you've said, we've got all these experiences now of terrorism in Britain and across Europe over the last 24 months or so, and they have similar designs to them and outcomes and impacts in terms of the questions we ask, how these individuals might have been motivated with regards to their radicalization. And I think this is something that's very systematic and clear. But we've also seen other attacks from far-right groups. And one of the major terrorist attacks in the UK was from a far-right so-called lone wolf. And then I think there is an issue around different kinds of radicalization coming into play, not just the ones that we're more familiar with. And I think this is a trend that's not just in Britain, but in other parts of Western Europe too.
Mandy, this is something that we've discussed in the past. One of the challenges when it comes to countering this threat is that the security agencies do not want to get caught in the whole web of being called racist. There is politics involved. What is it that makes this such a serious challenge for security agencies in the UK?
Well, I think it might be less to do with racial profiling and more to do with this lone wolf attack, because these attacks, the way police tend to catch perpetrators are complex attacks where there's chatter among attackers, terrorists, where they're talking about the attack. That's when police have the ability to disrupt it before it happens. But when it comes to these lone wolves, if this is in fact a lone wolf, of course we don't know who's who's behind this attack, they aren't talking to anyone. And so it catches everyone off guard, and that makes the police job a lot more difficult. And after certainly the Westminster attack, we heard Theresa May talking about more responsibility on the internet, because it was through a lot of people going on the internet who are getting radicalized. So people getting radicalized in their bedrooms, that's really difficult for the police to fight against. So whether it's racial profiling, it's more likely this lone wolf new wave of attacks, which, as you pointed out, are lower in numbers of casualty, but still have the ability to terrify people.
Tahir Abbas, do you want to weigh in on this? What is it that makes it such a security nightmare for agencies?
It's so difficult to predict. It's so difficult to ultimately plan against, and this is part of the serious problem. I mean, these kinds of attacks where we see, not in this case, but certainly in the past, where everyday items, trucks, cars, are used to attack ordinary civilians, is not new to the current era, but it's a very simple and very powerful device, an instrument of terrorism, and I think we have to be very vigilant. But what we don't know yet is the nature of today's attack, and who or what was behind it, and we still don't know too much about the device itself, apart from what we've been told thus far. Yes, of course, we're looking for someone at the moment, but we don't know the background of this individual.
Mandy, in previous cases, and as Tahir Abbas said, the investigation is still very much on, and security agencies are saying that they will treat it as a terror attack, but that's not something they've confirmed. Having said that, in previous cases, the individuals who were apprehended were mostly people who were on the radar and were dropped somewhere along the line. So that's another challenge that they'll have to possibly deal with and figure out a new strategy.
Yeah, and it's on the terror watch list, there's thousands. It's very difficult for the police to continuously watch these people, and that was the issue with the Manchester bomber, that he was previously on a watch list and then he was dropped. So it is very difficult. It's one of the greatest challenges facing Britain. But again, we don't know if this person was on the watch list. We have heard that, according to Donald Trump, that this person was in the sights of the police, but we don't know that to be true. The police certainly have not confirmed it, but they did find Donald Trump's tweet very unhelpful when there's an ongoing investigation.
And we'll come to that in just a bit. I want to put a question to Tahir Abbas first. How does it play out politically for Prime Minister Theresa May?
Politically, obviously, as Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party, there are other more sort of pressing domestic concerns. For example, Brexit, the economic issues, the minority status within the Parliament as well. So, in terrorism, yes, it creates a lot of fear, and we're talking about it a lot, but it's still relatively minor compared with many other weighty issues in terms of fatalities as well. So I think there's a concern for her politically that this is a very difficult time for Britain, as you can imagine.
Help me understand how does the average British citizen deal with this news, deal with the fact that this is the fifth such attack in 6 months? Professor Abbas, in your interactions with people, what is the sense that you get?
Well, it's a great deal of worry, concern, because obviously ordinary, everyday people are targeted by these measures, and people are naturally worried. And while there's a great deal of concern and chatter, but there is definitely efforts being made behind the scenes in terms of boosting the counterterrorism efforts and the countering violent extremism work that's necessary to build resilience. And altogether, obviously, these are major challenges. We have a divided society, haves and have-nots. We have people who feel that they have a stake in the future or not, as the case may be. And there are ethnic, racial divisions in society that affect all groups. And of course, often when it comes to these events, we point the finger to Islamist radicalized groups, and that necessarily puts a lot of pressure on existing groups such as the British Muslims, who are already facing all sorts of ongoing concerns. Again, unevenly, there is a body of Muslims who are very poor and marginalized, while there is also a body that is making advances.
Right, let's dwell on the Donald Trump angle a bit. I'll request you both to stay with me. Barely 4 months ago, a terror attack in Manchester targeted a concert. 22 people were killed, more than 100 were injured. The British authorities were investigating. No public announcement was made on that investigation. The identity of the attacker was not released by the British, but details emerged in the American media. The British government, understandably, was furious. But as they say, history repeats itself, and today an IED exploded in a London tube. The police were treating it as a terror incident. They even refused to comment if arrests had been made. All that was said was that the incident is being treated as a terror attack. And there came a tweet then from US President Donald Trump, suggesting that the British police knew that the blast was a terrorist attack. What's more, the elite Scotland Yard already knew who the attacker or attackers were. Trump even had a word of advice for the Brits. Be proactive, he said. Clearly, the British Prime Minister was not impressed.
Donald Trump has intervened to say that this was carried out by people who Scotland Yard had in its sights. Does he know something we don't?
I never think it's helpful for anybody to speculate on what is an ongoing investigation. As I've just said, the police and security services are working to discover the full circumstances of this cowardly attack and to identify all those responsible.
Mandy, how's that playing out? Donald Trump meddling in the affairs of the Brits once again, it seems.
It's very unwelcome. The police found it deeply frustrating when he had put out that tweet. That was even before reports that they had identified the suspect. Police official said, well, I don't know how we know the attacker or not, since we have yet to identify him. So it's unclear whether Donald Trump was just speculating or if, again, this was a intelligence leak, as we saw in the Manchester attack. What happened shortly after that Manchester attack is they started to refuse to share intelligence with the U.S. because they could not be convinced that leaks wouldn't happen. So it's unclear if they are sharing intelligence now with this attack.
I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks very much, Tahir Abbas, Mandy Clark, for joining us here and giving us all the details and your perspective on what's happening. This is an ongoing investigation, and this is a story that we will follow for you here on WION.